Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your Pauper commentators, Michael Petchick and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
Well, like the cats say, meowdy.
All right. Yep. You got me with that one. So we've got a storm coming up here in Boston, and I'm potentially being snowed in from work tomorrow, but here we are. We're here to talk about Pauper again. Let's take care of upkeep stuff, and then we can get into this show. We've got some interesting stuff lined up for you today, and yeah, let's take care of this. First off, we were brought to you this week, as every week, in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a really awesome online store with a variety of tokens, dice bags, playmats, and art prints from throughout the history of Magic and the history of the world at large. If you're interested in picking something up from them, we're affiliates over there. So you can either go to the URL originalmagicart.store/commentary, or use the affiliate code during checkout, commentary in all caps, and you get 10% off your order. So it works out well for everyone. We get a little bit of a kickback. You get a little bit cheaper tokens or playmats, what have you. Again, that's either originalmagicart.store/commentary or the affiliate code commentary in all caps, both spelled as they are in the name of the show, and 10% off your order. What do you got for us, Adrian?
Well, we have a patron, Trion. Just for $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including the pre- and post shows, as well as getting access to our patron-exclusive Discord channel.
Yeah, and finally, we were brought to you in part by Hipsters of the Coast. And Adrian, you had an article go up there just the other week.
I had my second Arena Pauper article go up there, which is something that we'll be discussing a little bit today. And it's all right. Check it out.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of articles, not just for Pauper, but other formats as well. So definitely go check them out and enjoy an article or two. All right. So this week we are talking about Arena Pauper because it came around again, and we've decided to cover these when it happens because it's a little bit of a break from the everyday. And today we're going to be discussing some of the meta changes within the format. And first off, let's talk about this event because we were talking in the pre-show. This was a weekend long, and last time we had like a week to play around in this format. So, Adrian, do you think that this is the type of thing, like these oddball formats are something that they should start running for longer? Or,
well, if I had my rathers, we would just have standard Pauper on Arena. I don't know if that's really going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the format was fun, and I think that for what we got this time around, and we'll go into it a little bit more, I think it's better that it was less time.
Yeah, there was definitely some interesting reactions on the internet as a whole.
So let's talk about the article, which we can of course link. Last time we had this event, I said above and beyond, the best deck is the Deemer control deck, which did get some new stuff, specifically got an Edict, which it very sorely needed in order to beat cards like Coldwater Snapper, and it got Ill-Gotten Inheritance, which is awesome in grindy matchups, and I thought would be very, very good in the mirror as well.
And so, just to remind folks at home, Ill-Gotten Inheritance is that weird 4-mana enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep, it drains a life from your opponent, and then you can pay 6 and sacrifice it to drain 4 from them.
Right. So I thought those two cards are great. Blue-black's still going to be the best deck. I went online and did some research for a player run event, and not to my surprise, the winning deck was a Golgari value deck, and then the second place deck was a blue-black control deck. We came out of the last event with me saying value is the name of the game. Sure, there's all these aggro decks running around, but really the removal is so good. As long as you can just 2-for-1 your opponent, you're going to win every time. And I dropped very few games to mono white and mono red, which are the two premier aggro decks. There was also a mono white deck in that top 4, and then like a red black control mid-range type deck, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. But there was no Persistent Petitioners. And I thought, Persistent Petitioners must not be as good as I thought. It must be more like Rat Colony, which, although powerful if unchecked, is ultimately not really a player in the format because it's so easily answered by the top tier decks. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Mike, tell us about your experience.
So I played a decent amount of Pauper this weekend. I played some on the more traditional like blue-black side, but I did sink 4 wild cards and grab myself 4 persistent petitioners, and I did play around with the deck, and it was fun for the first like 2 or 3 times I played it. Like, there is something enjoyable about, like, at least to me, having like alternate win conditions, and Mill is one of the longest running alternate win conditions just because there's always kind of stuff for it. It feels like every set we get like just 1 or 2 little pieces of Mill, whether it's incidental or intentionally pushed as a mechanic. It varies from time to time, but this time around, so let's refresh people. Persistent Petitioners is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 human advisor, and you can pay a mana and tap it and mill your opponent for 1. So 1 card off the top of the library into the graveyard. Then it has another ability, and it says tap 4 untapped advisors you control. Target player puts the top 12 cards of their library into their graveyard. And then it has the final and most pertinent line of text: a deck can have any number of persistent petitioners in it.
And I will take a quick moment to say, historically, cards with that text actually end up not being that cheap. Shadowborn Apostle is like $4. Persistent Petitioners is $1.
Is it really?
Yeah, check it out.
Huh. I would have expected that would have gone down pretty quickly, but yeah. So just a quick check on Twitter, the open social media platform of choice. Every other thing when I search for Pauper Arena is someone either talking about doing well with persistent petitioners or someone complaining that it needs to be banned. So obviously,
which is crazy.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is you compared this to like Rat Colony, and I think the big difference between the two is Rat Colony did really well the first time they ran the Pauper events because we didn't have either Mephitic Vapors or Cosmotronic Wave, the 1 toughness sweepers, and
right there were sweepers.
Yeah,
which helped a lot.
Once Guilds of Ravnica hit and you could play Pauper with it, you could very reasonably metagame for the Rats deck, and that was fine. The catch is Persistent Petitioners doesn't really have like a super great meta answer to it. They're right. 1/3s. Yeah,
that's the problem. The reason that the control decks were so good, not only were they 2 for 1 your opponent, but cards like Moment of Creating, which gain you life, and Fungal Infection, which can be a straight up 2 for 1, not to mention Mephitic Vapors, were so strong against them. And so black and blue, or just really black in general, had a lot of really strong answers to the aggro decks, and sources of repeatable card advantage that really helped them win longer games. You cannot do that with Persistent Petitioners. You basically have to kill them with your 5 mana destroy target creature spells, and you're just not going to be able to keep up.
Or like the other thing that I noticed was like the way they most frequently die is just in combat. Like outside of that, there's not like they're not swinging in with them. They're just sitting there and forming a wall
and milling you.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is like a bunch of 1/3s can just be assigned to block some big dork. Like if you have a 4/4 and your opponent has 4 petitioners, it's not a good idea to attack. Like you're going to trade 1 for 1 with them, and they're going to keep drawing more petitioners. Like that is a good chunk of their deck in all likelihood.
Right. You basically have to counter them. Or you could use a new card like Skewer the Critics. We'll get into that a little bit later, but what are the different builds of petitioners that you've seen?
So the two big ones were the one that I opted to spend more time with was petitioners and some blue support. You get stuff like Secrets of the Golden City, the 3 mana divination that if you have the city's blessing draws you 3 instead. You get the option to run stuff like Thought Implosion, a cancel that mills your opponent for 3. You can just run Opt, since the rest of your deck doesn't really have many 1-drops in it, and cantripping to fix and smooth out draws is a nice upside. You can
So you get to run blue good stuff.
Yeah, you basically can run like a small suite of blue support stuff and then a bunch of petitioners and then some islands, and that's it. I did see lists kicking around that I did not actually have a chance to try that were splashing black for a little bit of extra interaction as a way to deal with large creatures that your opponent was playing. But as I said, didn't really get a chance to play around with that too much. But the other far more popular option, so for folks who aren't super familiar with Arena, for cards like this, or well, for every card really, you collect up to 4 of them, and once you have 4, there's this whole thing with the economy where it turns them into rewards and in-game currency, blah blah blah. But with Persistent Petitioners in specific, once you have 4 of them, you can put as many as you want in your deck. You can just sit there and just click the plus button as much as you like. So there's 2 very simple versions. One of them is just around 20 lands, around 40 petitioners. And then there's the other one, which led us to discover a wonderful fact. The maximum number of cards a person can put in a deck on Magic Arena is 250 cards. And so I definitely saw images of people just going, okay, cool, like 90 odd petitioners and a little under 140, or 90 odd islands and a little under 160 petitioners. And that's the deck.
Damn.
So the thing, I think the reason that people started going to the 250 card version is it beats the mirror if they're not also on 250 cards. But
right, and is beating the mirror something that came up a lot while you were playing the deck?
Honestly, I didn't run into that many mirrors, but the ones I did, I personally did not see the 250 card variant. I don't think we'd gotten to that point in the weekend yet when I was playing. But
gotcha.
The interesting thing is that there is another card in Standard right now that you can run. It's Clear the Mind, which is a blue for an instant, or for a sorcery, draw a card, and target player shuffles their library into their deck. So you can kind of like get that advantage in a way, because those will actually loop with one another. You can kind of do the thing that people did with Devious Cover Up, but on a much slower scale. But I think at the end of the day, you're just better off running the huge deck, because that way you don't have this card that's potentially kind of a dead draw. But that's just gut reaction from me. I will say it is really funny. I don't know if you've seen someone playing an oversized deck in Arena.
No.
But
what happens?
The little pile for your deck does actually get considerably taller. I chuckled the first time I saw it. I saw it well before this. I saw someone just running like a oversized, I think, every single card in Standard or some nonsense. There was someone who just logged in and I was on mono red and I just dumpstered them before they did anything, but they did have 200 odd cards in the deck.
But it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was if they had gotten a chance to really do anything. Because obviously, you know, the big thing that people try and reinforce is the more cards you go over 60, the worse your consistency gets.
So that's actually kind of funny because not so long ago, that was a deck in regular Pauper. I'm sure everyone remembers. For those of you who were around, Mikey Ruru's 100 card teachings, 101 card teachings, 102 card teachings.
Yeah, the flexible but large. I think I've referred to them in the past as oversized teachings decks. The interesting thing about those though is like they're actually trying to interact with their opponent in like more than one way.
They're toolbox decks, but one of the ways they win the game is by having more cards in their library than you, which we were pretty dismissive of at the time. But what I wouldn't give for a day where that deck was viable.
Yeah,
that was back when the meta was truly wide open and you could really play whatever you wanted. Maybe those are some rose-colored glasses on my end, but there was still some innovation and still some brewing. Unlike, now every deck is Boros Monarch or Blue Black Delver. So
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is like just comparing those two is the fact that like the oversized teachings decks were highly specific. It was still like running like singleton copies of things because it had that toolbox aspect to it. But this is the complete opposite of this, where it's just like, yeah, sure, it's all redundant pieces.
So not to get too far away from our schedule here, but do you think Persistent Petitioners has a leg to stand on in regular Pauper? I mean, hear me out. Still no good sweepers. And sure, you have access to cards like Lightning Bolt and Doomblade. But again, you're not going to be able to kill all those petitioners. And a lot of people say that one of the reasons that Agrabolus is so oppressive against aggro is because it's a 1/3, just like petitioners. So is that a viable strategy in regular Pauper?
So I do think that the fact like a 1/3 body is really the perfect aggro stopping thing. I don't think that it completely makes aggro unplayable, but it does line up favorably with a lot of aggro bodies within the format. And I think the interesting thing is that you get a lot of options in regular Pauper. Two of the ones I've seen bandied around are Village Bellringer, which is 3 and a white for a creature with flash that untaps all your creatures.
That cannot possibly be the way that deck gets built. Keep going.
No. Hold on. And then also Dramatic Reversal, which is 1 and a blue to untap all non-land permanents you control.
That's much different. I just cannot see a world where splashing white for Village Bellringer is better than just being mono blue, personally.
May I offer you this? Why does it have to be one or the other?
What do you? That doesn't make any sense, Mike.
So here's the thing about Persistent Petitioners. Once everyone that you draw when you have between 1 and 3 of them is good for you because it gets you closer to that magic 4 point. After that point, it's less efficient for you to cast 4 petitioners than it is for you to play one of these untappers. Now, I get that splashing stuff in our format is not great, but I think that you don't actually want to be on like a 20 petitioner deck. I think you probably want to be on like 15 petitioners and then a bunch of support and draw spells. Especially because if you're in blue, like you get to run all the cantrips, right? Like you can toss in, Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordain, whatever fits best in the shell you're working with. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say like, yeah, sure, play this as a 2-color deck so that you have access to even more untap effects. But that's just me.
All right.
But yeah, like that's the big thing. These untap all your creatures things do let you mill twice in a turn. So it does speed up the clock.
That's fair.
But yeah, I think it's one of those things where someone's going to 5-0 with it at some point because it's a fun deck.
I think it's actually, the more I think about it, the more I think it must be inevitable that someone will 5-0 at this because Monarch, not that good against the mechanic, I mean, not the deck, not really that great against petitioners, right? Like they just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you're doing them a favor. They're not trying to engage in combat with you. Foil and Snuff Out, not that good. Delver, pretty good against them.
Yeah,
just because they're gonna be quick. But I could imagine that. I don't know. This might be a thing in regular Pauper.
I could definitely,
especially since they can play Gush.
That's true. Like you do. I think the thing is that in standard Pauper, the reason people are going to the very simple islands and petitioners builds is it's a lot easier to build in terms of the wild card system that MTG Arena uses for card distribution. But how many cards in standard right now in blue are better than another Persistent Petitioners? Like I think that's the thing at the end of the day. Like Opt is probably better than just playing another petitioner, but you're not playing like Devious Cover Up, are you? And like, do you really want to be in the position of like playing like main deck counterspells over outside of like the Thought Implosion, the one that mills them anyway, that helps technically advance your game state over just more petitioners. I don't know. I think that's the thing.
Right.
I think the deck is much more interesting to build in a format where like deciding between whether I want another petitioners or a preordain is a much different value equation.
Right.
All right. So this deck is out there. It got people either very excited for being able to play this deck or deeply upset that this deck existed. So let's talk about like how to attack this deck. So what are some options if a deck like this is running rampant, a very slow creature-based deck?
Pithing Needle, Phyrexian Revoker. Jokes aside, there's not really any easy answers. You know, we talked a little bit about Rat Colony, very answerable by cards that were good against other decks. I think is really the key. There were cards in the in black that were good at answering a bunch of different decks. It seems to me, the more I think about it, especially in Standard Pauper, the best way to beat this deck is to just play the bigger version of this deck.
Yeah, I think, but even then, like other people can do that, and then you're kind of on even footing again. And
right. So, but realistically, what's a regular deck to do? So the aggro decks, I thought initially might be able to just roll them over, but being a 2-mana 1/3 is a big problem. So, Mike, you came up with a solution of getting evasive, having flyers, and also there is that hard counter card, kind of, where you get to shuffle your deck back into your library. So, do you want to talk a little bit about the flyers, though?
So just just to quickly address Clear the Mind, I think it's a bad card to run unless that's your tech for the mirror. I don't think that mono or blue black control decks or even like blue tempo decks want to be playing that, because yes, it cantrips, but it's also a card in your deck, and it's not always going to be great. And I'm not a big fan of like inflexible sideboard cards when you can't get rid of them. So in terms of flyers, there's actually a decent amount of stuff right now in the format that flies, and importantly, if we go back to the days of yore, holds equipment and auras well. So if you want to come with me down this wonderful lane, I've got a couple of options for you here. Let's start things off with the duo of Healer's Hawk and Rustwing Falcon. So Rustwing Falcon is a 1/2 flyer for a white, and Healer's Hawk is a 1/1 flyer with a lifelink for a white. So I think
I know him.
I think so. Those on their own are not attractive, right? They're not amazing bodies on their own, but the fact that you can pair those even with something as simple as like Knight's Pledge, the 2-mana aura that gives a creature +2/+2,
right?
Like slap that on there and you've built yourself a 3/3 in the air, and that's an actual clock.
So much like I mentioned Delver previously, you just want to get a turn 1, turn 2. You want to clock them fast before they really have a chance to set up the 4 petitioners.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is also like making sure that the curve is low. Like there's also, if you're going all in on this and you just want to be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna make like the world's most abstract version of Cawblade. You've also got Artificer's Assistant, which again is a 1/1 for a blue with some trinket text that doesn't really matter here. You've got Fairy Duelist, which is 1 and a blue for a 1/2 with flash and flying and some text about giving a creature -2/-0, which isn't terrible in non-petitioner matchups. You can play Kitesail Courser. It's a 2-mana 2/1 that gets flying as long as it's attacking. And then you just load up on like auras, and while equipment isn't great right now, you can still run Short Sword, the 1-mana equipment that costs one to equip and gives +1/+1. So just kind of like leveraging early aggression in the air. Oh, you also, I always forget this card exists until I see it. Silverbeak Griffin. I believe
The 2/2 for WW.
Yeah, and I believe that this is like this is one of these weird ones. Yeah, I think this is from like the Welcome deck or a Planeswalker thing. I forget
It's
what
legal.
it is.
It's legal in Standard Pauper.
Yeah, it's illegal in Standard Pauper, which is the important thing. But like that into like, I don't know, Knight's Pledge, like you've got a 4/4 flyer. Like, what does the Petitioners deck really do against that if they're just running pile of Petitioners? I think you probably get there before they get there.
With your 1/1, your 2/2, and then your 3/3.
Yeah, like
I mean, that's a clock.
I get that it's not like sexy or clever or anything, but like sometimes just turning things sideways when your opponent can't block gets the job done. And I think that that's one very legitimate way to attack this deck is just play flyers, because they can interact with you. And if they can't block stuff, that body on the Petitioners could be an 0-1.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, that said, blue does get some interaction. Like they can play Blink of an Eye, which is why I kind of lean more in the direction of
The
equipment.
toolbox. Also,
Yeah.
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Never mind. Yeah, Blink of an Eye is a good defensive card for the Petitioners deck. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. I'm saying that like you can run ways in Petitioners to interact with things. Again, you have to weigh that balance of, is this better than just playing another Persistent Petitioners? But if that's something that you decide is like the correct thing to do, then like, yeah, you can have interaction. Also in Standard right now, we've got what else? We've got Jousting Lance, which is 2-mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 as long as it's equipped. And as long as it's your turn, equipped creature gets first strike and it equips for 3. Not, blowing the doors off anywhere, but and then there's also there's Pirate's Cutlass as well. The one that auto equips to a pirate when it comes into play, so you can play the Kite Sail guy, the 2/1 that has flying on attacks.
There's also Prying Blade.
I think Prime Blade's too slow. I do love that card for what it is, but I guess it does ramp you. Though I'm not sure.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, it doesn't seem great. There's Strider Harness, the 3-mana equipment that gives +1/+1 in haste and has equip 1. So there are options here. There's ways for you to make your creatures beefier and just kind of play an efficient curve and just go to town. As our Lord and Savior Craig Wesco would tell us to do, just play mono white.
Laughs in Wesco.
But yeah, I think that's like a pretty reasonable way to attack this type of deck, because the quickest that Petitioners really kills you is kind of slow when you think about it. So if I start with a hand of 7 cards, right?
Yeah.
If let's say I am on the draw, just to give my opponent who's on Petitioners the best shot. So on my turn 1, on their turn 1, they play an island. My turn 1, I draw. I've drawn 8 cards. I have 52 remaining in deck. I do something and pass back to them. Turn 2, they play a Petitioners. It goes back to me. I've drawn 9 cards at this point. I do whatever, pass it back to them. Then they have 3 mana, so they play a second Petitioners and activate the first one. So they mill me for 1. So 10 cards out of my deck are gone. Then it goes back to me. 11 cards are out of my deck. Goes back to them. If they hit 2 more Petitioners and a land, they're just going to have it online. So now I have drawn... So I've gotten 11 cards out of my deck, leaving me with 49. That means that I have around 4 turns left. So in the great scheme of things, like, I guess they mill me that turn cycle. So I really have 3 turns. So kind of the quickest you can kill someone with this is turn 7.
I think that's fine though, because
I think it's fine. I'm just saying it's not like, this isn't like a turn 2 combo deck.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, but I think that the deck just has so much inevitability, you can't really stop it. Like, that's the problem, right? There's just no good way to stop it.
Yeah, I think the fact that it has a game plan that a lot of decks just can't interact with in a profitable way is why it's so good. But I don't think that, like, I think that, you know, this kind of plays out like I don't want to say that it's like a combo control deck because it's not really doing many control things, but it kind of has a bit of that vibe where it locks down the board in a very specific way. But getting around it is not, like, flying is a pretty common keyword.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so outside of playing a bunch of flyers and ways to make those flyers bigger, what else? What other ways do we have to attack this?
Well, you put graveyard synergy in here. What are you referring to?
I specifically, while playing this deck, got completely had the floor mopped with me by what is it, Rhizome Lurcher?
Oh, yeah. You did say that.
Yeah, so Rhizome Lurcher, for folks who may have forgotten this card, is two a green and a black, excuse me, for a 2/2, but as undergrowth when it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your graveyard. So I had a game where I was doing the petitioners thing. I was, playing them out. I was milling my opponent. And I think it was like turn 6, they just slammed this thing as a 10/10. And now I have to be on the defense immediately.
Right. They abyssed you every turn.
They abyssed me every turn. And the thing is, had I been playing, even if I had been playing the just petitioners deck, there's still a chance that I don't draw a petitioner on any given turn. And if I can't keep 4 of them up, or I guess on board, I'm drastically reduced in the speed at which I can mill people. So I think that while it's not a slam dunk strategy, it does just have this one creature that gets to abyss your board every turn. Also, you get to play stuff that gets creatures back from the graveyard. So
okay, yeah.
Yeah, like it's definitely like a riskier way to kind of play against this, but from what I saw of this sort of graveyard synergy undergrowth deck, I think it's a pretty reasonable matchup for a deck like that because you're inadvertently feeding their game plan. And while they can't live forever that way, it does certainly open up options. Like them being able to like dark salvage back 2 things out of their graveyard, whatever they want, like is absurd when they have half the creatures in their deck in their bin. It's basically like getting a double tutor at a certain point. So I think that that's like a reasonable way to combat this deck.
That's fair.
I think the other thing that you can do is just go big, because
right, that's your last point here. Big chonkers.
Just
well, because it's the same sort of idea. You have a creature that they must block or they will die, and then that's just the best way to get rid of the petitioners because we don't really have good removal spells. It seems like no matter how you slice it in each of these use cases, the best way to beat petitioners is just to have a good offense.
Yeah, like you have to actively be doing something, and that's kind of how a lot of aggro control matchups play out, right? Like you just need to keep doing things and forcing them to be on the reactive side of things. And especially in Standard Pauper, I feel like a lot of the answers aren't good enough to really deal with a lot of the threats. So, and especially when your threat is a 2-mana card, you're usually trading down on mana if you're using counters. You're definitely trading down on mana if you're using removal. And I think that, like, if you want to beat this deck, you've got to be doing something aggressive. You've got to be doing something proactive. You can't just sit there and hope that they're not going to do anything, because their game plan is, for lack of a better way to say this, very simple to execute on. So
I don't think that's a neg.
No, I just like to make sure that I'm clear with people that I'm not trying to tell them that I'm not trying to yuck their yum. All right. So Persistent Petitioners is a doozy of a card. A bunch of people are saying it needs to get banned the next time this comes around. What are your thoughts on this, Adrian?
I just don't think they're going to ban this card. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't see it happening. Do you? Do you realistically see them banning this card?
I mean, I think the big thing is at the end of the day, much with Classic Pauper, this doesn't make them enough money for them to care that much. Now, if the next event rolls around and no one plays in it, they might listen. But I have a feeling that might not happen. So I foresee this continuing on for at least a while. Also, Wizards is, as always, reticent to actually ban things just because they like to gather data. They like to see what's going on, like to get a bigger picture. And this was only 2 days of data. So not the world's largest sample size, not the most in-depth data points. So I wouldn't expect a ban coming anytime soon. But that's just me.
I agree.
All right. So the other card that you had singled out, Ill-Gotten Inheritance. Do you want to talk about this and maybe brainstorm like what sort of shell you think this would be good in? Because you mentioned it in a blue-black control deck. Do you think that's the only home for a card like that?
No, I'm glad you asked. So, Ill-Gotten Inheritance, for those of you who don't remember, is a 4-mana enchantment, 3 and a black. At the beginning of each upkeep, beginning of your upkeep, excuse me. Wow, that'd be really broken otherwise. Ill-Gotten Inheritance deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. So it's kind of like Curse the Pierced Heart. It also has 6, 5 and a black. Sacrifice Ill-Gotten Inheritance. It deals 4 damage to target opponent, and you gain 4 life. So, like we mentioned previously, it is good in a blue-black control shell. Specifically, where my friend was playing it, he was running it over the 3rd copy of Watcher in the Mist. So it gives you inevitability, and it's good because you're always gaining a life each turn. And I don't know how to break it down more than that. It gives you some inevitability, and it also gives you some reach, and it also makes it so you don't die. So it's got like 3 things going for it.
So I definitely, at the pre-release for Ravnica Allegiance, lost to this card. I lost a full match to this card.
Well, so here's the thing. What is the common enchantment removal that you're playing in your deck on Arena? There isn't any.
Hold on, let me double check.
Oh, so you're gonna run the one of green card? Like, I just don't think people are.
Hold on, I'm just curious. I'm just curious if there's one that's actually good. There's a 5. Okay, here. This is almost
there is
reasonable
Blink of an
one.
Eye.
Okay, I've got one that is almost reasonable. I've got Blessed Light. It's 4 and a white for an instant. Exile a creature or enchantment.
Okay, that's all right.
There's
also Blink of an Eye. I just don't think that these cards are common enough. The card is very resistant because there's just not a lot of good removal for it.
Yeah. I'm really nitpicking here if we're being completely honest. Yeah. And I think Blessed Light is marginally playable, but I get where you're coming from. It's a very difficult to interact with threat.
In addition to blue-black control, I think it's also just fine in mono-black. It's really good with Blade Juggler, which is one of the best black commons, at least in limited, from the set. So that interaction is very, very nice. It gives you a Phyrexian Rager. If you have this card going, it's always going to be for 3 mana, and you don't really lose the life because you're going to gain the life and then lose it off of the Juggler.
Okay. So since yes, this does enable Spectacle, are there any other sort of Rakdos-y cards that you're maybe looking to play here? Like, do you go Rakdos so you can play Skewer the Critics?
So that's a little bit harder. I think it's a little bit too slow for a red-black style deck.
Okay. But, I mean, you are a deck that's playing a 4-mana enchantment that doesn't do anything till your next upkeep.
Right. I just don't think it's that good in aggro. It's really good with Dead Revels, which is actually a card that's impressed me a lot, at least in limited. But I think for constructed, maybe not so good. But yeah, I really like it in a control deck, not necessarily an aggro deck. I guess you could even put it in a mid-range deck and it would be fine.
Yeah, because if you want to think about it this way, it's a 1/1 unblockable with lifelink. And
right. It's very hard to kill.
Yeah. And on top of that, the reach it provides is not to be understated. Being able to nug your opponent for 4 is pretty solid. and it's only 2 more mana than the actual cost of the enchantment, so it comes online pretty quickly. So if you were gonna play this, do you think there's space to like put this in like an Orzhov shell or like another one of these black color combos?
I don't know how good Orzhov really is.
Okay. I can definitely
is the problem with that.
So I guess one of the nice things is if you're banking on a bunch of petitioners, Orzhov does let you have access to final payment, the white black instant sack a creature, sack an enchantment, or pay 5 life to destroy a creature.
There's also the black exile a creature spell, 3 mana grotesque demise.
Oh, the kill something, exile something with power 3 or less, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
The actually black version of what is that card? Complete Disregard.
Yes.
Okay, so like I can see that. I can see where you're coming from. Now, do you think there's also an argument to maybe pivot some of the threats in the blue black deck? Because I definitely saw some lists cropping up which were the blue black shell of removal and card draw, but swapping out the hexproof threats. Just kind of like a 1-for-1, like ditching the Salvager and Watcher in the Mist grind fest that exists and instead going over to hexproof threats. How would you feel about that?
So that was a contender in the previous metagame. I think that deck is probably still fine. It's a little bit worse with the Undercity or what have you, but since the event is played without sideboards, I think that the effectiveness of that card is not really as good as you might think. But I don't think that decks are cold to cold water snapper like they used to be. Just straight, used to just be straight up dead to it.
Yeah, and I do think I didn't see anyone really posting about like the Bant Auras deck this go around. And I think again like a 4/5 is fine. Getting it chumped repeatedly by a 1/3 is not super enjoyable.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I can see where people are coming from with the calls to ban Persistent Petitioners, because it does seem very good in this format right now. I just can't see that actually coming to fruition. I guess, were there any other cards that really caught your eye? I know we've talked about the 2 absolute standouts from the set, but was there anything else on your list that you were expecting to see show up that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, and I seem to have misplaced my article list. So give me 1 second. Another card I talk about is Footlight Fiend. I thought maybe it could go into the black-green Sapperling type deck.
Okay.
I'm not 100% there. One card that I thought was good, but that, again, Orzhov is not very good, is Imperious Oligarch. I think that card is really sweet.
Yeah, I think it's a really good creature. The catch is, like, in a format of 1/3s, a 2/1 vigilance is not super attractive.
Right.
Like, it's nice that it dies into a flyer. Like, that is kind of like a little bit of quote unquote pre-sideboarding. But I don't know. And Footlight Fiend again just like runs into that issue of it's a 1/1, and that doesn't line up well.
All right, so fine, shoot them all down. One card I thought was good is Prying Eyes. That's 6 mana, 4 UU, draw 4 cards, discard 2 cards.
Now this I like.
Yeah, that is a sweet card. And I really wanted it to be like a one of in my blue-black control deck. Just because drawing 4 is so sweet.
Like, it is super velocity. It is, if you get to 6 mana and cast this on your opponent's end step, you're untapping having seen 4 new cards. And
I would regularly get to that much mana. Like, that's not a difficult amount of mana to get up to in this format.
No. This is probably as close to what is the 6 mana draw for? Ingenuity or
Jace's Ingenuity?
No, that's the 5 mana draw 3. Isn't there a? Am I thinking of Tidings? There's some. I'm pretty sure that there is some 6 mana draw 4. Hold on.
Yeah, you're thinking of Tidings. It's 5 mana draw 4.
Oh, is it?
It's a sorcery though. That card is sweet.
I could have sworn that there was some old opportunity. Opportunity is 6 mana instant. Target player draws 4 cards. So yeah, this is probably the closest we get to opportunity at common anytime soon. But yeah, just ripping 4 cards is a lot. The other thing that I was curious about was there was what was it? Shimmer, the bad impulse, the sorcery speed impulse.
Yeah, Shimmer of whatever. I wasn't very impressed with that. Shimmer possibility.
Possibility? Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe that's not it.
There's a lot of cards.
Shimmer. It's called Shimmer Possibility.
Okay.
Did not like that card. Sorcery Speed Impulse is bad impulse.
Okay, that's completely fair. And then the only other thing I see in your article that's kind of curious, I'm curious about is Wrecking Beast. All
right. So going in with your idea that fatties are good, I think this card is good. Green was not really a player last time around, but it didn't have a 6/6 hasty trampler, right? And that really punishes your opponent for tapping out if they're on the blue deck. It's also good against Persistent Petitioners because it's a trampler. So I think this card is strong, and there is definitely enough ramp to support it. You mentioned earlier, like about Simic decks, you could even just play blue-green ramp, Growth Spiral, Llanowar Elves.
That's right. Llanowar Elves is in this format.
That other card that taps for blue-green, you could conceivably cast as well before turn 6 and have a very high, green stompy deck. So I thought this card, even though it doesn't look like it got played so much this weekend, I think it looked very strong going into the weekend.
Yeah, I definitely can see that.
And the haste helps mitigate some of the removal spells, because if you just smash your opponent for 6, they're forced to tap out the next turn to kill it, and then you just smash them for 6 again.
Yeah, also at 7 mana, you really want something that's gonna be a bit of a game ender.
Right. So I thought that it was pretty reasonable. I thought it was reasonable.
Okay, yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I actually just picked one of these up for my Pauper cube because I think it's probably one of the best top ends we've seen in a while. Because
it also looks like a turkey.
What is it? I've been
it's a beast.
I've stared at the art of this thing, and I have no idea what on earth this is supposed to be.
It's like a furry turkey.
Okay. I don't know, man. It's a weird critter. Okay, yeah, I can definitely see the case being made for some sort of mono green ramp deck, or maybe green blue. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about the fact that Simic was pretty much nowhere to be seen, and I think that makes sense. The adapt stuff at common was a little too slow, and Rakdos again kind of doesn't have everything it needs to hang with the big meta decks. So it's going to be interesting looking forward and seeing what Arena Pauper continues to bring us, because it's nice to have a little bit of focus on standard Pauper on a larger level.
Right. I agree.
All right. Do you have anything else for us on the topic of standard Pauper, or are we ready to wrap up for the evening?
I think we're good. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. This podcast is brought in support of our patrons, including Bladestorm. Welcome back. Please consider supporting us just like them if you like the show. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always welcome or appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS Pat's Games, Mike's LGS JP Comics, and of course, L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike signing off for Color Commentary.